maybe I'll throw, just to get started, a quick question into the panel, which is, with the recent complexity of the NFC ecosystem, where do you see the ecosystem now at this point of time, and where do you see it going in the next year or so?
The NFC ecosystem?
I actually observe what's going on the NFC space, and I see a lot of activity. I see a lot of activity on the transportation side. I'm actually putting my cards on ISIS. You guys probably say, "Oh my God, the guy's crazy," but that's what I'm doing, and I have the various reasons why I'm doing that. So I'm watching what ISIS is doing, and I notice in Woodinville, Washington State, near Seattle, I can now go to Jamba Juice. I can take my NFC-enabled smartphone, and I can do mobile payment with the point of sale. I see that. I see that in Seattle. They've got something called Orca Card, which is NFC in transportation. I see that going on. I see NFC going on entire Microsoft's campus. All of their badges are NFC enabled by Gemalto SIM card. You probably didn't know that. You probably didn't care about that. I see NFC going on. I see and wait for IATA and for CITA to enable NFC for the entire airline transportation organization. That's going to probably happen this year. Don't knock on wood. I hope that happens. Then you're going to see Apple come out of the woodwork. So I see NFC coming, and I see so many naysayers, and I see so many people telling me, "Oh, NFC has no future." That's bull. Okay. I'm here to debunk anybody who says that NFC doesn't have a future. They simply don't know what they're talking about. Okay. I spent 5 years enabling this technology to all the handset manufacturers in Taiwan and China, so that you could now enjoy this on your smartphone. So, sorry, I'm very controversial. It's the only way I do things. Who's next?
Okay, I think it's going to be a pleasure to follow this. So, I see the NFC ecosystem. I think Karl and I have been working in this ecosystem for a while, on the enabling really the infrastructure. So not so much on the in front of the consumers or the retail, the merchants and everything. And basically we've seen the whole world, all the MNOs around the world, the mobile network operators equipping themselves with expensive trusted service managers, with expensive SIM cards. And I think the last time I counted it was something like 40 operators around the world actively buying and still spending millions of dollars a year into fueling this infrastructure. And it takes a while before it actually comes into the front of the consumers, but all that wave of investment, infrastructure investment, has already occurred. And it's still continuing. Now it's basically, it started from Asia, it moved into the US, Europe, and now it's Eastern Europe and soon Latin America. So we see basically this wave going around the world in kind of a strange path, but it's still happening. And we know the groundwork has been done with the OEMs a long time ago. I mean, Nokia had NFC in its phone, and then because of Nokia, it removed it and yanked it out. But now all the Androids in the US are NFC enabled, and that's tremendous. And Apple will join in when it's able to actually reap the benefits of all the infrastructure in place. And we all know that, and they already have a secure element to put a fingerprint in it. So they're almost there. So it's just a matter of the consumer changing the habits, seeing the value, someone really figuring out how the consumer extracts value. So far it's been with mass transit, which everybody knows is not an American forte. So it's a little bit tougher for the US to jump on board. But it's already there. Sorry.
Are you criticizing our transportation network? Hey, Americans can do that. No, you're American.
Well, I disagree with both. I don't, but I just want to share. So I'm from AV Node, and AV Node's been around for since 1795. We make basically secure documents, driver's license, student IDs, transit cards, hotel cards, Visa, Mastercard, Express Discover, the passport. So we've really been in sort of the secure data space for a long time, putting secure data onto all of these vehicles, vehicle being something that carries the data. So we've seen a convergence of technology from the smart cards. You know, RFID technology came out and has evolved, and now we've seen basically everything standardized on a 1356 megahertz with a 14443 ISO standard, from your payment card to your access control card. So all of these different industries use this technology. And we're seeing NFC kind of jump in here with a payment focus, yet it's so much bigger than that, because NFC is going to go through this same convergence. And soon, it's really a transaction we're putting on the phone. The fact that it can be a transaction that takes advantage of 443, such as a EMV payment, PayWave, PayPass, or your hotel door lock. So we've actually got a bunch of pilots going with hotels, with transits, with payments. We have a wallet up on iTunes and Google Play. It's really showing proof of concept at this stage, because the secure element in the phones, and I know there's standards out there, but there's really not standards implemented. And so the different secure elements that are out there, is that feedback from me? Good. Are you interrupting me? So basically what I see is the ecosystem is going to converge. This technology is going to come into play once we can read and write to the secure elements on the phone across the board. So if the handset manufacturers deploy a secure element and the keys to manage that become truly enabled to the general public, then we're going to see this take off and go scale.
Now, NFC, very much, just one point. We've seen a different adaptation rate based upon different geographies. You guys can talk about that, because obviously, if you look at the Far East, it has been evolving way faster than it is here in North America. And the question to think about is, what do we need to do right here in order to bring it as fast as it's coming in the Far East?
Well, that's what I was going to say. When I hear it's just the beginning of the deployments, SKCNC is the IT company, the SK Group. So we enabled the Korean market. And we have 3 million active users of NFC. And they use it every day to take mass transit. So to say that it's just at the beginning, I think it's a little bit tough, because this has been already deployed since 2011.
Right, I mean, you have to qualify where.
Exactly. It's just, you know, someone said the future already exists. It's not just very well distributed. And I think that's definitely the case when it comes to NFC. It is very well here already. It's just not very well distributed yet. But the steamroller is actually coming through. What do we need to do it? As mentioned, I think I agree with Karl that ISIS, with its shareholders, is putting the infrastructure in place available to, what, 70 to 75% of the US population. So they're doing their part. When the merchants come aboard, and there's a good use case for it, I think it will just come naturally to the right.
Go ahead.
So it's much more, mobile payments, which enable the MNO, the operator MNO, the bank, and the transportation company, the three major stakeholders, to all start to cooperate with each other. But the problem is in most countries, they're semi-governmental and they're owned by the government. And so therefore, we find that all three organizations really can't talk to each other. We also find the same situation in the United States. I'm not 100% sure if ISIS will not work with banks. I believe that they should. I believe that also banks are the ones responsible for not putting enough security on the end of these mobile devices. So MNOs and banks are responsible for not having enough security. They're also responsible for not pushing NFC in the United States. They're the key ones responsible for not doing this. They could and they should be doing a much better job. I'll give you an example. In China, China UnionPay pays for the mobile posters to be put into all the banks. And so the banks have mobile posts, NFC mobile posters in the in all the banks, the major banks, and contactless credit cards, smart card credit cards with contactless already ubiquitous in many Asian countries, but especially in Greater China, China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. That will be the largest market on the planet for NFC, without a doubt, no question. But what's interesting is how NFC has enabled transportation companies to take the lead in this. In Hong Kong, I say that's the best implementation of contactless on the planet, because it's a very small population, 7 or 8 million people, and they've enabled NFC using traditionally the Felica card, right, which is Japanese Sony technology, but they've implemented it well. Guess what? They've completely migrated over now. They've launched last month. I don't know if you're watching the newspapers. They've launched to NFC, the standard for NFC now in Hong Kong, because Octopus Card has finally migrated over, and the operators of the banks, but the banks are jealous of transportation companies because they're making money off of NFC by providing small payments with their transit card. Taiwan is doing the same thing. The Easy Card Corp is very successful. So I say the banks need to reinvent their business model, work better with the transportation companies, and they also need to work with the handset manufacturers. Because, by the way, it was not an easy thing to evangelize and push these handset manufacturers to design in NFC. I had to be the rainmaker in the middleman, talking between the banks, the OEMs, the MNOs, the OEMs, and even the governmental financial organizations. So, handset manufacturers, you constantly leave them out of the picture. This is a huge mistake, because if they don't make the handsets, you don't get those handsets. So Asia is going to be number one with the development of the NFC technology. It already is. Get on a plane and go to Asia. Then you want to see what's really happening. You reporters in the room, go to Asia, report that. That's what you need to do. And then push Americans to get off their asses and do more with NFC. I'm sorry, I'm not politically correct. Can I say that? You can delete it. Delete it.
Jim? Well, when you get back from Asia, we'll be waiting. I do agree ISIS has done a great job driving the infrastructure, getting merchants to put in the NFC-enabled readers across the merchants. Merchants are buying into it, but here's where I disagree. ISIS has really been working from the acquirer's point of view, tying in loyalty points and programs, and have done a nice job pulling that all together. But it's the issuer that's going to be driving this out to get it into the phone. And the issuers are generally the individual merchants, banks, credit unions. Their customer is their key. They are not sharing their customer into a big pool of people to be shared across the board. So the program that we've been endorsing, which of course no one knows about it, so we're doing a bad job. But what we've been pushing is where the individual issuer controls the enrollment, controls the use, and can then send the data through a TSM to their consumer's phone. And one of the things that we've been promoting is a dongle that plugs into the earphone jack. The only consistent item in the entire world on a cell phone is the earphone jack. So we've made the secure element a component that plugs into the earphone jack so we can move forward with proof of concept and show how easy it is for this deployment to take place. Now someday when the dust settles, it might be a standard in the phone that the handset manufacturers have to drive and own. But between now and then could be 5 years. And so this is a proof of concept to go to market. And there's companies out there that do instant issuance of credit cards. So you lose your credit card, you walk into a bank and say, I lost my credit card, I'm leaving for Europe. There's the method now for the bureaus to send the data over the internet to a printer that has a secure element that encodes the chip on the card. That same infrastructure, then if we have a standard on the phone, we could send the data over the internet to the secure element in that secure element plugged in the earphone jack, and we can begin to go to market. One of the pushbacks we had from the retailers and the banks when we were first coming out with this, we said, oh, we have a sleeve that plugs on the iPhone, and we have a SIM that works for this model of Samsung. The bank said, I can't roll something out that only 10% of my customers can use. I'll alienate my 90%. So we never got pilots going. The advent of this component that plugs into an earphone jack has had an explosion in the amount of smaller pilots that we see. So I think this is going to be a step that takes the market to it.
Now, one of the big issues on the NFC side is some of the mobile handset manufacturers, such as Apple, do not support obviously NFC. So how do you tackle that?
Well, essentially, the earphone jack, Apple phones have the same standard earphone jack. So this actually circumvents any smartphone. And there is the ability to work with standard non-smartphones. It's something that's in process, but then there'll be more technology in that component that plugs into the earphone jack So it will be the future to address any phone. Right now, we can address any smartphone.
The question is, I mean, and you guys have been discussing this, when you look at the different stakeholders, which are, if you look at the banks, the MNOs, you look at the merchants, if you look at Google, how do you get all of them actually to work together? Because that's just been one of the issues here in the whole thing. And it's known that Google had to change a whole direction when the MNOs basically blocked them from using the SIM in order to do their Google Wallet. So how do you go about that?
I think Google is addressing that problem itself. I mean, once it was locked out to not be able to issue cards into the carrier's secure element, it came out with HCE in KitKat. So it's actually creating its own negotiation power. So now they can go back to the carriers and say, well, either we have access to secure element or we're just going to work with HCE. Which one do you prefer? And the issuers, I believe, will always prefer more security if it's affordable. Now, does ISIS make it affordable? That's the question.
The question is ISIS cooperating actually in this or not?
Well, I think ISIS has its own cost infrastructure that also stems from being the first one to, I mean, I shouldn't say the first one, because actually we installed the Google Wallet TSM in 2010, so it was available way before. But they have a cost infrastructure that makes it so that maybe it's expensive for a bank to issue a credit card to a user they might already have as a user, simply issuing it into the desktop. So I think Google is creating its own negotiation environment. It's going to work out. Just these things take a little bit of time.
Yes, so I believe Google will benefit from it. But Google will benefit because they're an issuer, and they now are promoting their own Google card. But they shouldn't own the infrastructure. If there is a standard wallets that are out there with some ISO standards, then the Google organization can drive the Google customer to virtually download the Google card to that standard wallet. And then all of the benefits they can drive. And they will, once there becomes an open infrastructure, Google will be a force because they've got the clout to drive their customers to having a Google card. Then Amazon could do it. All of them could do it. The difference is the issuing of the wallet and locking it up with a SIM chip that belongs to a telco. The telcos don't belong in the transaction space with merchants. Sorry.
Yeah, I think what we're missing the whole key point, which is the security side, because HCE is it's a workaround between using the SIM card. Where does it direct? It directs, I think, through the CPU or through the mobile apps processor chip. Actually, what I think is going to happen is Google is going to further alienate the MNOs. They're already upset because they're an OTT vendor. They're very strong. So is Apple. OTT vendors upset operators. They're terrified at the strength of OTT vendors. No, what I think is going to happen is they're going to drive the adoption of the secure element out of the SIM card. They're going to think it's going to go to the cloud, but I think it's not. I think it's going to go to the mobile apps processor chip, and they're going to use the TEE in order to... You cannot have security on these mobile... I'll tell you the truth. You want to hear the truth? Are you ready for it?
No, lies.
You cannot protect these devices with software only. Nobody can. It's a combination of hardware and software. The secure element is secure. You can't crack it. It's a SIM card. But when you move it out of the SIM card and you want the same level of security, you don't. But you can move it into the mobile apps processor chip, but it's a little bit less level of security. It's still security and it's better than HCE. But however, Google doesn't care about that. Google has never cared as much about security. It's an afterthought for Google. Payment is number one. Security is number two. I'm sorry to say that, but I've seen the facts. So Google is working around and they're further alienating the MNOs. They're upsetting the MNOs. Who's going to win? Smart card vendors that know to migrate to buy mobile apps processor chip vendors. Those are going to be the winners. Because the only way to get security in these devices is a software and hardware combination. Bingo. Qualcomm, are you listening?
I actually agree with Carl, and that's painful for me to say.
I'd like to ask, is everybody here aware of what a TEE is? And who knows what a TEE is?
Yeah.
Okay, Carl, can you go back again?
Okay, so what's really important here is after I cracked the ecosystem between handset manufacturers and MNOs for NFC, Gemalto put me on the Trusted Execution environment, which is a company they bought in 2010 called Trusted Logic, which spun out in 2012 to a three-way JV between ARM, Gemalto, and G&D, their competitor. Why? Because ARM, as the platform vendor for most mobile devices, knows that the security is not enough in the mobile handset. That's why they wanted to strengthen the security via the chip. Intel's doing the same thing. So you want the dirty little secrets about the mobile handset, you can't secure it with software. You need a combination of software and hardware. The TEE stands for Trusted Execution Environment. It is a secure firewall environment in the mobile apps processor chip, and you need software called the TEE. It's a mobile software security operating system. It's an OS that goes into a firewall in the mobile applications processor chip to secure authenticated software. They're already protecting the DRM for Netflix, Google, and Amazon Kindle. Bingo. You don't even know it, right? The TEE is already protecting tablets for high definition video content. The next thing that they want to do for the TEE is to protect mobile wallets and mobile wallet pin codes, and that's what their objective is. If they succeed, then that will be very good. We all want the same thing, security, but security cannot be second. Unfortunately, with MNOs and banks, they've made it second, and they made profits number one. Can't work that way, can't work that way.
I disagree with that statement,
Okay.
that they put security second. The MNOs have spent a lot of money to build out the secure NFC infrastructure with GSMA and secure. And I mean, we're now rolling it out with Vodafone. We're rolling out our wallet. Our wallet is NFC and non-NFC, simply because NFC is not always accepted everywhere at the merchants. But the preference for everybody is to have a secure NFC environment with a trusted service manager and a secure element. The issue is more the acceptance of the merchant. So to say that they don't care about security, why would you spend probably more than $1 billion worldwide to equip the networks with a secure infrastructure?
Because they're adding the TEE into the TSM, that's why.
I would like that. I don't think anyone's taking security and putting it second. I think the security is paramount to banks, it's paramount to anyone who has that secure data. It's important to them, including Google. I do think, though, the long-term play is to get the secure element in the TEE. That's where it belongs. The problem is the path to get there is not going to be immediate, but that's where it belongs. In the interim, there's got to be other methods to...
Correct. They're going to be the intermediate steps that you were talking about, and so forth. Looking at the usage right now, just slightly different point of view, and Karl mentioned, within transit, it's extremely heavy use, specifically in the Far East, but I believe it's also going to be used here very heavily in transit. How do you get it propagated to other areas, to other markets, by maybe leveraging the transit NFC solutions and maybe migrating to other spaces, but only when we get it basically to the whole ecosystem of the usage from the consumer perspective, then we get obviously the full adaptation. Any thought on how to push into that?
We've got a number of transit agencies that have already deployed smart card technology. So these are the ones that are already down the path to be able to move towards NFC. For a transit agency to go from a magstripe card to NFC, there's a large infrastructure cost to it. But many transits have moved to RFID. Many hotels have moved to RFID. So great.
Sorry, I'd like to make sure that we're keeping the terminology. So for me, it's not an RFID, it's contactless.
Yes.
Because contactless is secure. It's the right level of application. So migrating a contactless application onto NFC, this is something that NFC was created for, is to take a contactless smart card that actually transacts and migrate this application onto a cell phone. That's really what the card emulation mode of NFC was created for. And the thing is that for human beings to create habits, you have to do the same thing over a course of 6 weeks. And so the question is, what are the use cases where the same user over the course of 6 weeks is going to repeatedly have the same new usage, right? And transit is great because as a user, you want to go through.
It has to be quick.
It has to be fast, and the transit authority wants it to be fast, so everybody gains actually through it. The only one that doesn't, as Jim mentioned, is that usually the transit authority doesn't have a lot of capex to invest into anything, and they're going to take a while to actually migrate maybe an existing contactless system to supporting NFC because of that. But it's the interest, and it's worked in Asia. I believe it will work. Here in the US, public transportation is often seen as the transportation for the poor, and therefore, and I've heard that before, for a lot of carriers they say it will not work because the people who use public transportation most likely do not have a smartphone, or most likely do not have a credit card, or most likely, so it's basically what they're saying is this is not the target user base that we want to invest in. So as long as we have this disconnect, I think it's going to be hard. But as soon as finally we're willing to actually invest and support and the transit authorities migrate to that, I think it will be pretty fast after that.
You're talking, for example, in New York City, having 7-8 million people transiting every day, and they're using an NFC like card, basically, maybe card, whatever they swipe. So why wouldn't it be adopted in, New York City?
Well, okay, so that's another story, but most of the cities here are using MyFare, so they have to put MyFare into the system. So the investments that everybody has made
More expensive.
does not even support MyFare.
So what if the dongle that Jim talks about supports MyFare?
So our approach is different because payments is one element of my business. The majority of my business is MyFare, Desfire, Felica. So what we've come up with is the ability to handle all sorts of data. I can take hotel MyFare data, I can take the transit Desfire data, or I can take a Visa payment data, store it in the same wallet, and have 3 separate cards, and each one of those different issuers enrolled their own customer.
All in the same wallet.
All in the same wallet. Well, it's just a shell. The virtual card that gets downloaded is where all the branding gets put. And so there is technology out there. It's an NXP chip that can handle both the payment, the MyFare, and the Desfire in the same place.
It should be NXP, they control, they own it.
It can only be it.
Just opening up for questions from the audience, but I think we're out of time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question on, Karl, especially for you, maybe, you're a big fan of ISIS. And,
Well, no, I don't know if I'm a big fan. 4 years ago, it was the Egyptian lady. No, I don't. ISIS is the operators. Many of those operators got their start in Seattle, and if you don't know the history of analog cellular, Seattle is a great place. I know ISIS a little bit, but I don't know if they've got the right model right now. But anyway, what's your question?
My question is around,
We already got the answer.
my question is around, so a lot of the reasons why, companies like ISIS, for example, are attracting retailers because of the, they want to offer coupons, loyalty programs, incentives that will essentially drive traffic to the stores. Now the question is that there's a competing technology out there now, iBeacon, that can do that, and it's already in every phone. So how do you see the rollout of iBeacon affecting NFC? Because from a retailer's perspective, that provides more value. From a bank's perspective, every phone has it, it's ubiquitous. So why would
Right. I'm going to use 2 analogies here. I think that NFC will be used like the connected car for bootstrapping, eliminating the use of Bluetooth, discovery and pairing. NFC will be the younger, the cousin of Bluetooth in the future of these mobile devices. One will work off the other. And you can see that now. If you go to Sony stores, you see Sony not only has the NFC icon in their wireless Bluetooth speakers, they've got it in their Bluetooth boom boxes, they've got it in their TVs.
It's how they do sharing, which is much faster.
So that's one way that I think NFC and Bluetooth are going to work together. Now, I think that NFC is also going to be used in the same way for that immediate proximity requirement, along with iBeacon. I think NFC is going to be used along with iBeacon because you can't always find an Apple person in an Apple store with
with a mobile post device. So, you know, when you can't, or when they're very, very busy and you're very busy and you can't find anybody to do that, I think NFC is still going to have some value with Apple and with iBeacon. That's my humble opinion. Proximity isn't going away. It's still needed. That's what I think. If Bluetooth and NFC works well with Bluetooth, it does.
I think secure payment with BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy, is rather difficult to do. So couponing, broadcasting, yes. The problem is the payment. So either you go into a model where people just step out of the store and the payment happens without the user's involvement. I think we're not quite ready to do that, except maybe for Uber and some specific use cases. But in most stores, we actually need to still have our articles checked out, and then we need to pay. And people are not going to be very comfortable with something that is on the Bluetooth Low Energy without any security.
Well, the question is, you know, if I'm an iTunes user, iTunes already has all my payment credentials.
Yeah.
I just use iTunes to check out.
But you will see that even Apple already, for some security, like the fingerprint, for instance, that is stored in a secure element in the iPhone. So I would be, I mean, of course, nobody really knows what they're doing, and it certainly will not be disclosed publicly, but I would be very surprised if they're not using that secure element also when it comes to actually paying for the phone. Because there must be some liability somewhere.
Yes.
And it's going to be interesting to see. We know how well all those databases are protected, and we know that nothing can ever happen with those databases. So I'm sure that we're going to make sure that people are actually at least authenticated locally.
One of the maybe well-known secrets is that Apple holds a stack of NFC patents, actually. Everybody's wondering what exactly are they going to use it for. We'll see, iPhone 6. Yes? Any questions? All right. Thank you, and thanks, Karl, and thank you.